I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Men Podcast, episode number 151. This one's with Michael May and Paxton Holley of the Hellbent For Letterbox podcast. We talk Westerns. Their podcast, Hellbent For Letterbox, is them watching a film and then talking about it over the course of an episode. It's a great podcast. I love hearing their thoughts on different Western films from over the generation. If you'd like to learn more from them, first of all, download their podcast, Hellbent For Letterbox, or you can follow them on Twitter at Hellbent4letter, or Michael May Comics with an X, and Paxton Holley with an E-Y on the end. But yeah, give them a follow. Make sure you download and listen to their podcast because it's a great podcast. And I really appreciate them for being on. Sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media consultation company based here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So they do work for clients big and small all over the country, all over the globe, in fact. But they also do photography, videography, video editing, and audio editing, website design, SEO, writing, content development. Hell, they'll babysit your kids if it nets them money. So make sure you give them a follow on social media on either Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Feral Giant. And be sure to give them an email today and hire them for your next project. Without much further ado, here's the episode. Is Westworld a Western film or a sci-fi film, do you think?
So you're talking about the movie version from the 70s?
Movie version, yeah.
Sci-fi.
Okay.
Yeah, sci-fi.
Okay. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something to start the podcast. So.
do you have a different perspective, Jody?
No, I think I think it was marketed more, seems like, as a Western. Mm-hmm. Whenever I watch like the old trailers and stuff, it seems like it focused a little bit more on that. I don't know if it's the effects were just not great. So but they seem to lean on to the Western side of it more. Yeah. So that was my, I don't know. That's
yeah. I mean, they got Yul Brynner. So I mean, that's very much
yeah.
Right.
I mean,
right.
They were looking for Western, but I mean, they call it Westworld, but there was also like Roman World was in there as well. There was another one. There was a couple of others, but they did focus a lot on the Western part.
Yeah. And I just think like the themes that they were thinking about were more sci-fi themes about like AI and killer robots. Basically, they were more interested in that than they were in kind of the Western themes. Like I think, like I would still call the TV show mostly sci-fi, but they were kind of thinking about some Western themes in that.
Yeah. That reminds me, I got a lot to fuss at y'all about the films you don't like. Oh my God. Don't get me started. There have been some episodes where I'm sitting there just like, oh my God, guys, come on, you're killing me, man. Like Magnificent Seven, I know was one, I think.
Well, we love that movie.
Yeah, I think, or maybe I'm thinking of something else. I know
there were some we recorded. We knew we were like, we're going to get blasted for this because
High Noon was one. I was just
was one. Yeah.
You're killing me.
We have contrary opinions about that. Yeah.
Maybe it's high. Magnificent Seven ranks so high in my book. I was like, come on, let's go. Let's bump it up. The Three Amigos episode, I think, was one of the best episodes. Because it was just you two fanboying out on Three Amigos.
That one and Rustler's Rhapsody are probably my favorite episodes. Yeah.
Us fangirling for an hour.
It's just giggling for the entire episode.
There was another friend of mine. He showed his daughter Three Amigos for the first time. I think he's going to kill me because I can't remember her age, because she's still little, just like David is still little in my brain.
My son, yeah.
He's not an adult. I'm sorry. He's a little kid.
Right.
But he showed his daughter Three Amigos. He was like, she loved it. That made me so happy that she loved that movie. I was like, yeah, as she should. Yes.
Yeah, you should. You should love that movie.
Really funny.
Yeah. So what did you all grow up watching Westerns? Like, what got you all into Westerns as a genre?
You want to go first, Pax?
Yeah, sure. So it was my dad that got me into Westerns. He was a big fan of Clint Eastwood. And so I watched several movies because of him. I remember Bronco Billy was one of the first ones that I remember seeing, and Outlaw Josie Wales, and stuff like that. So he would watch those, and I saw that he loved those. And then, we picked up a couple like Silverado and Rustler's Rap. So we watched together. There would be Westerns that we would watch together. So he kind of got me into ground floor, kind of enjoying Westerns. And then I kind of got away from it for a while, but then ultimately came back to it. But it was really my dad that kind of got me.
Okay.
For me, it was I didn't watch a lot of Western movies as a kid, but I watched a lot of Western TV shows as a kid. They were on all the time. Bonanza was a big one, Big Valley, not so much Gunsmoke, but every once in a while I tune into that. A lot of Western adjacent shows, like Daniel Boone was a favorite of mine when I was a kid. And so yeah, I don't know, like I kind of entered adulthood not having a huge background in Westerns. At some point I remember, I worked in this video store that I keep boring everybody with the details about this video store I worked in, but I right out of high school, I worked in this video store, and we had a pretty good Western section, and we had certain customers, and I worked the day shift, so it was a little bit quieter. I had more time to like talk with people as they would come in. And a couple of our regulars were big Western fans, and so they would always, they would rent the Westerns, and we talk about them, and even though I hadn't seen them, they would recommend certain ones. And I remember taking home The Big Country one time with Gregory Peck, and just being blown away by it. It was not at all what I expected, not what I thought a Western was supposed to be. It was it wasn't about a gunslinger coming into town and saving the town from, the rail barons or anything like that. It was just a completely different kind of character. Gregory Peck doesn't even play like a Western hero. He plays the ship captain from back east who kind of comes out to the west because that's where his fiance lives, and then he gets embroiled in this feud between her dad and this other family, and he refuses to get involved in it. And so the movie is just about kind of like being your own person and not really caring what other people think of you, which is like a big, like, that's a real theme that I connect to. So I just really opened up my mind to like, oh, okay, Westerns are not just shoot 'em ups. I kind of hate the term odor. People talk about, refer to Westerns as odors. And I just like, no, like Westerns are so much bigger than just that. And
I don't know that term, odor.
O-A-T-R. Yeah. As in, I guess like the oats that horses eat or something. I don't really know where it comes from.
Yeah.
But I see it in reviews sometimes, usually by a critic reviewing a Western movie, but it's just it's a clue to me, like this person is not a fan of Westerns. They kind of lumped all of Westerns kind of into this one box. But Westerns are just so much bigger than that. But I know another way is kind of getting into like why we created Hellbent, because Pax and I, we kind of knew each other through the podcast that he used to be on called Nerd Lunch. And I had been a guest on there a couple of times. And then we actually were at a convention together, him and his Nerd Lunch friends. And we went to dinner one time, and we we're talking about stuff. And I found out that Pax is a huge fan of the movie Rustler's Rhapsody, which was another one that we had at the video store, which I took that home all the stinking time because it is hilarious. It's a Tom Berenger movie, for those who don't know it. It's it's just so funny.
It's
And
early 80s, right? 80.
yeah,
85.
85. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But we were both really big fans of that movie. We were both big fans of Young Guns. That was another one. So like there were these other kind of westerns in the 80s, Silverado, like, you know, the 80s wasn't like a big boom for westerns, but there were a few. And so enough to kind of make me, you know, reinterested in the genre. And I don't know where, I think something started, like Pax and I were talking, we both have blogs, or did back in the day. And we would kind of post about like stuff we've been watching or whatever. And I know Pax and I kind of read each other's blogs and would comment on each other's blogs. And at some point, one of those conversations just got me thinking about all of the westerns that I wanted to see and was probably never going to get to without some kind of a reason to do them. And so I just reached out to Pax and said, hey, you want to do a Western podcast? And just, you know, kind of as a way to like force ourselves to watch a bunch of these westerns, these classic ones. Like I had never seen, I think I'd seen Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but I hadn't seen either of the other two Dollars trilogy movies by that point. I don't know. There's a bunch of, I don't know. And now I'm talking too much, but
no,
no. I guess
I was going to say, I remembered, I thought what the other one was. It was Once Upon a Time in the West, maybe. Were you all kind of,
that was a big one. Yeah, that was a big one that we hadn't.
Yeah,
ones that we didn't really love.
Ones that were iffy on.
Yeah, we
so
didn't
that one I still laugh at. You talk, Pax, you talk about your dad. I have dad movies, you know, the movies that it was like, you gotta, hey boy, you gotta watch this. The one that the one I love telling people is I was 10 or 11 or 12 years old, and he was flipping around. He was like, oh hell, here you go, boy, you gotta watch this film. It was 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, and he made me watch Deliverance while he went to bed. So I just sat there by myself watching Deliverance, looking out the window because I'm in the South. Like, what the fuck? No. But one of them was Once Upon a Time in the West. We watched in the kitchen on a TV that was like a 13-inch TV in 1989, 1990. I was like, yeah, I'm sure that's how Sergio Leone would have wanted me to watch this.
That's his ideal situation for watching that movie.
With that little bitty crappy speaker trying to listen. Yeah.
And the vertical hold going, burr, burr, burr. Yeah. That was like Mike said, that was my memory as well. He was doing either one of his like movies I watched this year or movies I wanted to watch and I didn't get to. And he had a couple of Westerns on there. And I commented saying like, oh, I wanted to see that too. And then we kind of went back and forth about a Western. And my memory was that either I said something like if we keep doing this, you're going to convince me to get on a Western podcast. And then I got an email a couple days later saying, so what if we did do a Western podcast?
Oh my God.
And so that's just kind of how it all got started. But yeah, like I said, my dad got me into it, but I got out of Westerns for a while, like into the 90s and then got back in on my own. So it wasn't the 90s. So it must have been like mid 80s. And then there was a couple of years I kind of stopped watching them. And then when Young Guns came out, so I was like 88, 89, that pulled me back in, like dyed in the wool, like that pulled me into Westerns. So like after Young Guns, like I became like a aficionado. Like I was watching Western movies. I started reading pulp Western novels. I would go to secondhand stores and buy these like just cheesy Western novels about Butch Cassidy and Billy the Kid and Jesse James. And there's all these kind of very pulpy kind of gunfighter novels. I love those things. So I would do that and I would watch movies. So that kind of that's what kind of pulled me into doing that. And I kind of I wouldn't watch Westerns as much as I wanted to. And that's why when Mike came at me with like doing this, I was like, yeah, you know what? I need to watch more Westerns. And I'd like to get back into reading more Western novels because I kind of dropped some of those. So that's kind of where I came from. And that's kind of gave me like my bread and butter for Western stuff is really kind of like the gunfightery, pulpy kind of Westerns is really kind of my favorite stuff. But the stuff that's been great is that I find other types of Westerns that I've really kind of enjoyed is like Mike said, like Big Country or coming to these more relationship Westerns or these like other kind of circumstance Westerns where it's not just like the unerring gunfighter that wins the day. It's other stuff that goes on that has really nothing to do with gunfighters. And that's what I like being exposed to is these other stuff I kind of outside my box.
Okay. It's kind of wild because
you think about like those films of the 80s, it could have also been that it was alternative people doing Westerns. Like, because Clint did some 80s Westerns, but it wasn't your John Wayne, your Clint Eastwood. It was all these other random people doing Westerns in the 80s. So this was a question I was going to ask later, but I'm going to bump it up now because I know a lot of people when Unforgiven came out, they're like, there doesn't need to be any more Westerns. This is it. This is the definitive. This puts the nail in the coffin on Westerns. And yet they've still been producing Westerns since then. And they've produced a lot of good Westerns since then.
Yeah.
So do you think it's harder now, or it's more few and far between? It's not the cheap thing that it used to be way back in the day. How do y'all feel about like more modern Westerns?
I love modern Westerns. We don't like today in 2023, we're not getting as many of them as we did. Like there was a stage when we were doing the show, I don't know, not too many years ago. I probably don't even want to know how many years we've been doing that show because it's in my head, it's like 3, but
right. Yeah.
But there was a point where like there were just a ton of new Westerns coming out just for a good couple of years, and they were really good. And one of the things about doing the show is that I'm more aware now when a new Western comes out, and I'll like kind of bump it up on my list. Whereas before I was like, oh, that's interesting. Someone's doing a Western. It's a direct to TV thing with, Ethan Hawke or whatever. And I'll just kind of, I wouldn't pay it too much attention, but now I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch that thing. But like the movie Damsel that we did an episode on, which is Robert Pattinson and Mia Wasikowska. Yeah. And great freaking movie that I probably would not have like made a priority to go see if it wasn't for our show. So like I don't know, I remember those reviews about how okay, Westerns are done now that Unforgiven has come out, and I get it. Like it was a great movie, still is a great movie, and it was really commenting on a lot of themes and questioning a lot of like the tropes and characters from a lot of these classic Westerns, so that I'm sure like a lot of critics saw it. It's like, okay, yeah, this is like the final word on the Westerns. And it was like, I don't think it was Clint's final word. But it was just like, it's such a great commentary on what had come before, but to say that, okay, we never need another Western again, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I would have said that Unforgiven is Clint's final word on Western, that it's like him saying like, I'm playing this character and I'm closing off this version of the character. And and I see that whole trope of, the man with no name, and what they gave him a name in that movie, but it really is kind of closing off his kind of lone gunman character. And it does it really in a really great way. And so I see that where it's like, okay, well, Clint's stuff is closed off, but yeah, I agree with Mike. It's like ridiculous to think that closes off Westerns in general. I mean, there have been several Westerns after that have been really good, like you said, Jody. So I mean, I don't even want to say, like, I really like that movie, and I always like it more than I remember I like it, because I remember thinking Mike and I did the show and I was like, okay, we'll watch this, it's good, fine, whatever. And then we watch it, I'm like, okay, yeah, it is a really good movie, but there's some really good ones.
The two that I think about are like Open Range, I think is one of my favorite film of the 2000s. Like I went into it not expecting it to be as funny as it was. And I think it was the first one. I think I shared this with you, Michael, about when I was watching that film. I was like, oh yeah, that's how it would be. It would be new wood being put up. Like it was a lot of that weird stuff. I was like, oh yeah, this is a weird new take on a Western that I really enjoyed. And how beautiful it was. Like it was just a beautiful film to watch. And
it looked gorgeous. I agree. And I mean, you got Costner and Duvall just charming it up. Like I love both those characters. And
there's a guy in that film that I love him every time I see him in anything. Abraham Ben Ruby, the big guy. So he was in
Mhm.
Parker Lewis Can't Lose in the 80s.
Mm.
And of course, anytime I see a big guy, I'm like, that's
Right.
my guy right there.
I remember that guy. Yeah,
That's
that's
my
right.
guy. So seeing him in that, I was like, oh, hell yeah, that's a dude from, because he was in The Program. He's been in tons of stuff. But,
Mhm.
and the other one was the Seraphim Falls. Like that was
Mhm.
one, I think in the early days of Netflix, I got it on DVD and then made Greg, our buddy Greg, watch it. And both
Mhm.
of us came away going, man, that was a great movie until like the last 10 minutes when it just went off the rails. Like it was like, what the hell is going on? But it was such a
Yeah,
great the two of them against one another, Liam
Yeah.
and
yeah, I
Pierce.
agree. And Pierce, yeah, I agree. And those two guys are great. I love that movie. I love the last 10 minutes. I think I
Okay.
love where it went. It reminds me a lot of this comic I read called Six Gun. And like, if you listen to the show, like, I think I got a lot more out of that ending than Mike did. And like, it would be interesting. I'd like him to watch it again so we could kind of go through that ending again. And I've watched it again since. And I really like kind of where it goes at the end because it really does kind of bring in some kind of supernatural kind of stuff and just some this bigger ideas at the end there than really what you're saying. And I really liked that. So that was a good movie.
That's the one movie that I would love for us to do a second episode just on that movie. Because I have meant to go back and rewatch it and I haven't done that yet. But yeah, it was one where like by the end of us talking about it, I was like, you know what? I think I missed the whole point of that movie. I need to watch that again. And which is part of the fun of doing the show with Pax, and like we do that to each other. Like we'll help each other see stuff that we didn't really think about as we were watching it.
The first time I watched Unforgiven, I was just like, this sucks. Why are they talking that way? This is awful. And then some things stuck with me. And I think I watched it like 3 times in one weekend. And I was like, there's something in this film. And then just everything sort of dawned on me. And I have gone back and watched the last, I think it's 20 minutes from the scene of him and the young man on top of the hill. From that scene all the way to the end, I was like, this may be the best ending of a film I've ever seen. Just the turn and then him going in town and the dialogue in the bar. It's just like, shit. Like this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Pun unintended. Unbelievable. Unforgiven. That's their tagline. Yeah. Unbelievable. And before I get too far past it, I got a merch idea for y'all. T-shirts say Westerns ain't odors. That's all I'm going to say.
All right.
There you go. I like that.
And if only I knew a graphic designer I could hire to.
I don't know any
logo.
of those. No. In the middle of this podcast, I'm like, all right, and here's your proof. And here's a T-shirt printer, and we'll get this up by tomorrow at noon. High noon.
We'll get
tomorrow.
It up.
Yeah. So we've started naming off some, Rustler's Rhapsody and some of the. What are some of what films in going through all this kind of surprised you that you enjoyed so much? The ones that you kind of forced yourself to watch?
Mike brought up one of probably the biggest ones, Damsel. Like he picked that one. That was his pick. And it had Robert Pattinson in it. And the name, and I didn't really watch the trailer, and I was just like, really? Like, we're really watching this one? And I was like, okay, whatever. And I sat down and watched it, and I was completely blown away because it's a completely different movie than you're expecting it to be. And it's got all this extra story and stuff. Like it's funny, and there's other things going on that's just like, it's just not apparent from like the poster and the name. And even reading the little synopsis, it doesn't really even tell you what that movie's really about. And so finally watching it, you're just like, oh, okay, that was amazing. And like, I was so surprised and going into it, not really even wanting to watch it and coming out being like, that was amazing. That's the magic of the show. That's one of the ones that I remember always as being the biggest surprise.
One huge surprise for me was Banditas. Starring Penelope Cruz and Selma Hayek and Steve Zahn, which I remember. I don't know. I think we picked it because we were kind of going through a phase, which we haven't completely gotten out of, but we really like movies starring Westerns starring female characters, where the female is kind of the lead. Jane Got a Gun with Natalie Portman is another favorite of mine.
That was a good one.
But Banditas, I was just expecting this dumb that are kind of only exploitive kind of movie. And it is dumb, but dumb in all of the best ways. Like it is just, it's ridiculous and fun. Both of those characters, Penelope Cruz and Salma Hayek's characters, are both just awesome in different ways. They have like super horses, like Trigger, like, you know, they're like, their horses really kind of put Trigger to shame, actually.
Yeah, they do.
And Steve Zahn is really funny in it. So that was one where I was like, okay, I went into it thinking I would, you know, probably enjoy it on some level, but it ended up being like one of my favorite movies that we've done.
Banditas. Even as much as I love Salma Hayek, the marketing of that film was just like, oh my God, what is this film going to be? Is it going to be a lot of them in steam in baths and stuff? Like,
right? Yeah, that's what you think, right?
In the bustiers and everything. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I have like another one, and I keep picking on Mike's picks, but those are the ones that always are usually the surprise. Like I can't even count the number of times that like Mike picks a movie, and I'm like, all right, I guess we're doing this. And I come out at the end, and Mike and I have our discussion. I'm like, you know what, that was pretty awesome. So, one that he picks, what was the name of it? It was the Tom Hanks one.
News of the World.
Yeah, News of the World.
Oh,
Thank you. So News of the World, he picked that, and don't get me wrong, I like Tom Hanks. I think Greengrass made it, and so I was thinking like, okay, this is gonna be one of those big, dramatic, long, epic kind of like, and I was just like not in the mood for that, and I was just like, okay, well, here we go, I got to watch this, and it wrecked me. Like it wrecked me how great this movie. I watched it twice for the show, and I don't normally do that, and I watched this movie twice before we did the show, and it was fantastic, and I loved it. I've seen it since again, and it was a great movie, and it was another one that's just like popped up into my top. Like we did our top 15, it popped in there because it happened to be right around that time, but it knocked a couple movies off because it was that good.
Yeah, that was even though I picked it, like that was a surprise to me how good it was too. I picked it just because people were buzzing about it, and I was like, really, this one is like, I don't know, people were heralding it as like, you know, the greatest Western since Unforgiven, basically. And so we watched it, and I agree with Pax. Like it was just it wrecked me too. Like it was super emotional.
It's so funny. I've got like 15 episodes loaded up that they're movies I haven't watched, just like you all. I'm forcing myself to the ones with Mads Mikkelsen.
The Salvation.
I want to see that one.
Yes.
But News of the World is also on there because he did those films for Apple TV Plus, Greyhound, News of the World. I did watch Finch, and that was a film that same thing. How you all are talking about News of the World is how I reacted to Finch. I haven't watched Greyhound or News of the World yet, but Finch was just like, holy! I did not expect it to be as good as it was because all those films made it feel like almost like made for TV movie. And Finch is unbelievable. If you haven't watched it yet,
no, I haven't seen it.
Unbelievable. And I will spoil one thing: the dog is alive at the end of the film. I swear to God.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Yeah,
the dog survives.
That's the thing. You worry about the animals, man.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially in old westerns, you worry about them.
But yeah, I think I've got like 15 episodes still loaded in there. I was like, some of them are older ones. Like there's the one with Marilyn Monroe, and is it Marilyn
River of No Return?
Something. Yeah. Oh yeah. And you had
Robert
the word
Mitchum
river in it. Yeah.
Robert Mitchum.
No Return.
I was trying to think. I was like, is it Clark Gable? It's not Clark Gable. It was Robert Mitchum.
Like my pick after that had Clark Gable in it, but that one was River of No Return with Robert Mitchum and Marilyn Monroe.
And I know something I've talked to you all about, but I'm curious now what you think. What do you all think about modern era films that are kind of called like neo-westerns, or whatever you call them, like Copland or Hell or High Water? These more, or No Country for Old Men would be another one I think would fit in there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if I had a nickel for every time someone asked us about Hell or High Water or No Country for Old Men, like we get asked to do that a lot actually. And but Mike and I in the very beginning made kind of a rule that we weren't going to do, that we were doing period westerns. We aren't doing modern day that uses the trope of a western like those movies. we do that. Like if we do those, it's one of us watched it and we just talk about it in the beginning about with our Westernins. But we will not, we don't really do those episodes on modern. We don't use an episode for a modern Western, but we've talked about it and people do ask us all the time, but I mean, we're more interested in doing the period kind of stuff.
Guilty. Yeah. I think I provided a list. It's like, here you go.
Yeah.
What about any of these? And you're like, nope.
Yeah. And it's not like that we're not interested in them as movies. Like I love Hell or High Water. Like that is a fantastic movie. It's just, we just kind of drew a line in the sand when we started the show. Like we were going to do historical Westerns. So yeah, I don't know. Am I gonna say?
I'm not pushing. I was just curious.
We won't say never. Yeah, we won't say never because we're not hard and fast with the rules. I had
never, as much as I've seen and loved Copland, I didn't realize it was a Western until like years later, where somebody's like, "You realize that's just like a modern Western." I was like, "It really is. It really is."
It's weird because like unlike Hell or High Water, it doesn't take place in the West. It takes place in New York, right? So, but the plot of it is very Western-esque.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. In going through this, like the anti-hero is a huge thing in Westerns.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all, I think I know Pax is, I think it's going to be, it's going to be Young Guns part 1 or 2, but like some of your favorite, do you know some of your like favorite anti-heroes in characters in Westerns?
Yeah, like I love Clint. He's just such a personality, and he kind of tends to play the same character over and over again, but I really like that character. So he's always going to be a favorite. But I also love like when you get an actor like Gregory Peck or Jimmy Stewart playing those kinds of characters, or Randolph Scott, these guys who just look like just really square, clean cut, upstanding guys. But then you see when you're watching the movie and their characters, kind of have this darkness to them. And I always find that really interesting, even more so than, kind of like some of the spaghetti Western stuff. Like the spaghetti Western stuff is super cool. Like, we joke about Lee Van Cleef being, like friend of the show. He's like basically the show mascot. Like we love Lee Van Cleef. And he plays a lot of anti-heroes and I love every one of them. But I'm also like really drawn to like, John Wayne has done a couple of anti-hero, kind of characters. And I think that's really interesting to see him play that. Like I'd rather see him play that really even more than, some of his like straight shooter kinds of characters. Like, his character in Stagecoach is arguably an anti-hero. Like he's an outlaw, looking for revenge on the person who like killed his family, and the sheriff, the law, like they're trying to stop him and trying to take him in. So, even as early as that in a big classic John Ford Western, he's kind of playing an anti-hero.
Yeah, you nailed me, Joni. Like Emilio Estevez as Billy the Kid's probably the big one. I love that archetype of the anti-hero. So he's the big one. If you look at all my top Westerns, so like there's Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. I love those movies. Like even more recent, I love Russell Crowe in 3:10 to Yuma. Like he is a fantastic anti-hero, and I love that story, and that's a great movie.
Is he even an anti-hero though? He's like kind of straight up villain.
Yeah,
right?
Well, he's a straight up villain until the end when he kind of makes a little turn and helps out.
True.
So he does have a little turn at the end that makes him, I think, an anti-hero. There's an argument either way. It's arguable, but
I think you're right. I think he is a villain for most of the movie, but like the movie kind of is about his transition into maybe becoming an anti-hero. That's pretty cool.
Because it feels like at the end of that movie, he could be just like this kind of devil may care kind of guy that could ride the West and help out people. Like, but he's not maybe the nicest guy. Like, so
right.
He's just. I want a series of movies of Russell Crowe as that character.
Right. Same.
So yeah, so like those were some of my favorites. Like, I mean, and speaking of Clint, like my favorite is Outlaw Josie Wales. So his Josie Wales character is probably one of my favorite anti-heroes. Like, just he's just not like he's a strong character. Like, and like, and he has it's very similar to some of his other ones, but like I just like Josie Wales better than even anything else he's done, and I just like his story, and I like he adds. I feel like he took a lot of the humor that was in Dollar's trilogy and kind of amped it up a little bit. And I'm a big, like, I'm a sucker for humor. Like, so if you add a little humor to it, Josie Wales is pretty funny as just kind of an anti-hero guy. And that's why I think I love that one the most. So Josie Wales is probably my best for me personally, Clint Eastwood.
And it's weird, in like the early days of DVDs, I would just buy DVDs. So I bought like Josie Wales, but I also bought like a crappy like 3-pack of the No Name trilogy from like Walmart or somewhere, and I watched them and I thought they were just okay. And then for Father's Day one year, I bought my dad the director's cut of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Of course, I had to borrow it from my dad and watch it, and it is so much better than just the regular version, that it completely flipped Outlaw and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in my brain. I don't know what it was that was different, but it just it clicked for a different reason that time, and I don't know. I couldn't tell you what is the difference between those two films. It was just different, and still. So we touched upon villains. So in watching all these, is there somebody or a few that you all think is just like pure evil? Like that was a big selling point when Dad made me watch Once Upon a Time in the West. He was like, you got to watch this because the opening with Henry Fonda is the craziest thing ever. Because I had grown up, I loved 12 Angry Men, even in middle school, because I was a weird kid because my dad showed me Deliverance when I was 11. But so I loved Henry Fonda. But then watching him in Once Upon a Time in the West is like, why is he a mean man, Dad? Why is he a mean man? Why is he a bastard? If you'd let me say bastard, I would say bastard. Like, it was so weird. So are there people in the films y'all have watched that are like almost like pure evil?
Yes, and I'm trying to remember the main one that popped into my head, and I brought up probably because I just brought it up, 3:10 to Yuma. Ben Foster, the second hand, like not Ben Foster, the actor, who is the second hand to Russell Crowe, is just mean and evil, and just he's the one that Russell Crowe ultimately has to butt heads with at the very end of the movie, and he's just no good. He's just a snake, and Ben Foster has played characters like that, and he just nails it. Like, he is really good at that character, and it's great. But yeah, that's the main one that popped in my head. I'm trying to think of another one that's just bad.
Alan Rickman in Quigley Down Under.
Oh yeah, nasty. That's a good one. That's a really good one.
And Ewan McGregor in Jane Got a Gun is also super creepy.
Yeah. Well, and even I mean, we talked about Magnificent Seven, but the remake had what's his name as the bad guy, Preacher, and had the jar in the beginning, and had the kid put his hand in the jar, and it was just like, is there a snake in there? Is he gonna bite him out? And like that guy was pretty bad. Like that was pretty bad.
For sure.
I was trying to look. There was a Western that came out in the last couple of years that. Shoot, now I'm not going to pull it. It was nominated for Oscars and stuff, and now I can't. It's not Power of the Dog. It was something that I think was just nominated last year. That it was about a group of women. It's going to drive me nuts.
It wasn't The Keeping Room.
No,
The Keeping Room was about a group of women. There was another one that was it was a remake of a Clint Eastwood one, something Beloved, the
Beguiled.
Beguiled.
Now is this even going to be a Western? Women Talking. That was the one.
Oh yeah.
I think that was a Western. I think.
Well, I was confused about that because like the outfits that they wear are very kind of Western-esque. But I don't even know if I actually saw a preview for it. Like, it's really interesting. Like, I want to see that movie, but the impression I got was that it was like about a modern day cult. That just
it is. It's 2010, but everybody is dressed And even there are scenes that I saw that I was like, this is a Western. No, it's 2010.
Yeah.
It was set in 2010. Okay, never mind. That was the one I was thinking. Because
Okay.
I think was it Bruce Greenwood plays just like
Oh wow.
the personification, which is a weird turn for him because he's usually a good guy
Right.
in all the
Right.
films. So that was one I was thinking of. But
Okay.
okay, villains, and we'll go the opposite side. The good character doesn't even have to be, because I think of like Val Kilmer in Tombstone. Like he's not a purely good person, but he's awesome. He's awesome. Like, are there any people who shine brighter or are good that you can think of?
Tom Berenger as Rex O'Hurlihan.
Yeah.
That's like the greatest good guy ever. Good guys. One popped in my head and it popped right back out again. Who was I thinking of?
And I know you all didn't like it, but I feel like Montgomery Clift's character in Red River was kind of a purely good character.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't like that movie for a very specific reason about the ending. But Montgomery Clift was awesome in it. I really liked his character a lot. Another one that we watched fairly recently was Murder at Yellowstone City, and Thomas Jane plays a preacher in that, which is just kind of weird casting because like Thomas Jane, I associated with like kind of tough guy roles, right? But he plays this preacher and he's married, and him and his wife, I forget who his wife was in the Pitch Perfect movies. I can't think of the actor's name. But he was just, I kept expecting him to kind of have like this dark edge to him, or like this, to be revealed that he was actually, like not really a good guy, but he was like, he didn't have like a completely spotless past, but his character in the movie was completely a good guy. So that's one of my favorites from recent films.
Along those lines, I'll throw out Old Henry. So Old Henry, the main character, like very similar, like a spotty past, but like as you see him in the movie, like he's just this hard worker. He's working this farm. He has a son. He's trying to teach his son to do the right thing and everything. But then circumstances get out of control, and you learn he has a checkered past and everything. But he does everything he can to kind of atone for some of that. But that's another one that was just like, that movie blew me away. I love that movie, and like, it didn't make my top 15 only because I watched it after we made the top 15. But if we did my top 15 again, it would be in my top 15 right now. I love that movie, and that Tim Blake Nelson as Old Henry is just fantastic in that movie.
That was one I didn't find out until a bit later. I still have not seen that. That one's in the queue of thousands upon thousands of films that I need to see.
Yeah.
Weird question, but have you all ever traveled to the West or any movie locations, or ever considered doing that to Monument Valley?
Not to Monument Valley specifically. My wife is from Albuquerque, New Mexico, so she has a bunch of family still out in New Mexico, and so I've gone out to New Mexico several times, and I've gone to several places that are, that had Western locations and stuff. The goal ultimately for me is to drive a couple hours south to Lincoln County, New Mexico, and go see the Lincoln County Courthouse, go to see Fort Sumner, and kind of just do the Billy the Kid tour, which is several hours south, which is really hard to just. Grandmother's like 90 something years old. So like really hard to say like, okay, well, we're going to leave for a couple days and go down there because she can't make the trip. So it's like really hard to kind of break away. She has a lot of family there, and it's really hard to break away and do stuff. But like I've talked, everyone knows we want to do this at some point. So at some point we're doing the Billy the Kid tour when we go out to New Mexico.
They're just going to look around Thanksgiving like, where did Pax go? Just a cloud of dust.
Yeah, done. I'm gone.
We made a trip to Arizona a few years ago, and just because we knew somebody there was the reason. But we spent a week and we did a lot of driving around. Went to Tombstone for a day, and went to Monument Valley. In fact, if anybody like is on any of our social media pages, there's usually the banner is this shot of Monument Valley. I took that photo when we were there. What else did we do? The little town that we stayed in was where Zane Grey kind of retired and did a lot of his writing. So they have a Zane Grey museum there. So that was my one kind of trip to the West. I would love to do more. I'd love to get to New Mexico. Even, oh no, you know what? We did another trip to South Dakota even earlier than that, and spent some time in the Black Hills, Deadwood, and that was beautiful. It's not like the first thing I think of when I think of the West. I usually think of the desert, but the Black Hills is gorgeous.
Okay. It's been peppered all the way through, but other media that y'all consume. So in doing Hellbent for Letterbox, I know Paxton, you said you had already been reading books and stuff, but did that also make you all want to read more like books or comics or radio plays or listen to music? Did you all start seeking it out once you started doing the podcast?
Yeah, because Mike brought up that he wanted to do a segment in the beginning where it's like, what have you been Western in? And like, so it would be, we do the movie for the main thing or a TV show, and then other stuff would be like books, TV shows, comics and stuff. So he wanted that to be part of it, which I thought was great because, yeah, I wanted to get back into reading Western novels. I wanted to read some Western comics. I hadn't read a lot of Western comics, so this was my chance to kind of dig back into some of those. Like I used to love Marvel's Kid Colt. I used to read some of those, and Charlton had a Billy the Kid title that I read for. So there was a bunch of stuff I wanted to catch up with. So yeah, the show was a great opportunity to not only pick back up on my Western novels and force me to be like, okay, well, we got a show coming up. Maybe I need to read a book this time, or maybe I'm reading comics this time. So it put it back in my routine to kind of do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, when we first started the show, like I've kind of dropped off a little bit of some of my reading. But I think it's not so much because I've lost interest in Western books and comics, but like especially the comics. I was a big fan of Comixology, and like when that was actually a site that I could use, it was very easy to just go search for Western comics. And I had a whole like wish list of Western comics, and so we used to cover those quite a bit. And then when Comixology kind of as its own thing went away and was kind of rolled back into Amazon, I just lost some of the functionality, some of the desire even to go exploring. But I still have a bunch of Western novels here that I need to get to, and it's just hard to get them into rotation. But like Appaloosa is one that's I'm going to probably be reading that pretty soon because we also want to cover it on the show. But there's like, I forget how many in that series, but that's a whole series of books, and I really like the movie, so I want to read the book and the sequels as well.
Have either of y'all read Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy?
It's on my list, but I haven't done it yet.
Good luck.
I've considered it, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. He's not my thing, but like I've considered it.
So fun fact, he, like 2 or 3 of his novels are set here in Knoxville. And he was a professor at UT. And there was a point in the early 2000s where people went around and read Suttree at the locations. So he was always in my brain, and I bought all of his books, read them in order. But Blood Meridian took me like 6 months to read because it is just so dense and brutal and just the darkest of the darkest things you could ever imagine.
And that's kind of his thing, right? Which is I agree with Pax. It's not really my thing. Like I need a little bit of light in my reading. But I do have it on my my Audible wish list. Or maybe I've actually even bought it at this point. But so when I quote unquote read it, I'll actually be listening to it. That'll be a little easier for me to.
So I'll give you one that is a little bit easier to read or to consume, and they made an HBO movie of it starring Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel Jackson. Which Samuel Jackson, he hasn't been in No, he hasn't been in a Western. Would
He
you
was in
Django
consider?
Unchained.
He was in Django
Django
Unchained.
So that
which
is a Western. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really more of a Southern,
Yeah.
but it's
Right.
Pax and I are pretty loose with
Geography we're loose. Period. We're not.
right. Make our own rules.
Yeah.
And Tommy Lee Jones directed that one called The Sunset Limited, and it's very good.
Oh.
I've read the play. It's weird. I've read the book, the play. I saw it performed in San Francisco, and then watched the film. And it's I'm trying. I don't want to spoil anything because I think it's just two people talking, a white man and a black man, and they're literally called white and black in the book. And it's just them talking. And
is it Cormac McCarthy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a play. And I think the movie's like an hour and a half. It's a shorter movie.
Yeah.
And HBO, like 20, like it may have been like right after No Country for Old Men, maybe right before even. And the movie's pretty good. The book is really good.
Okay.
Like it is just, and I will say it's not as bleak. That's his other, because when I was reading The Road, I was telling this to a friend the other night. I was like, I was reading it, and I'd get to the end of every chapter and go, well, it can't get any worse than that. And it just kept getting worse. And I was like, good God, this is killing. But Blood Meridian, like it is one of those, I was like, I think it is a worthy read, but it's brutal. It's brutal. But I like Cormac is also just like, good God, man. Some of the stuff he writes about, I'm like, did I just read that? Somebody published that. Okay.
Yeah, they picked that to publish.
Okay. All right. That dude just had sex with a watermelon. Okay. Cool.
Well, now you have my attention.
Yeah, right.
Now we're getting into hour 2 of Ramblin' Man. That's Ramblin' Man After Dark is what it turns into. So this is a question I've bounced around with the podcast. Have y'all ever considered doing a live recording? I know y'all are in different locations, but you ever thought about it?
You mean live as in
person, like somewhere setting it up and doing an event?
Okay. Yeah.
Like I don't know, are there Western conventions? Surely there are Western conventions.
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are film festivals too that I know. Yeah. I've heard there are a couple of the Western podcasts I listen to do that, like do live podcasts from whatever film
in
festival
front of an
or
audience.
Yeah, in front of an audience. I mean, we did one live one. He was at my house, and we did a live one talking about the West, like was it Cowboys and Indians top 100 Westerns or something?
That's
like that.
right. Yep.
Yeah, so we did one live. It was just us. Like, would we do one in front of an audience? I mean, that'd be something he and I would have to talk about. But I mean, I wouldn't be against it. No, I wouldn't be against it if we were invited to some one of these, and there was a way for us both to be there. Yeah, I would do it.
Yeah, I can't say I would be super excited about it. I don't know. I would buck up and do it, but
a lot of things are going to fall into place to make it work.
I'm a bit of an introvert, and I don't know that having an audience in front of me would be the best way for me to be comfortable, but I don't know. I wouldn't say no.
See, I kind of, because I've thought about doing like a live Ramblin' Man here in town, but if I did it, it would be like in a bar that was like locked down where there were like 15 or 20 people maybe. Because the person who performs the theme, Adeem the artist, is kind of blowing up right now. I was like, I should do a live one with Adeem and have Adeem perform during the show. I think that would be a lot of fun. Yeah. So that's I've been to live podcasts. I think they're a lot of fun, but I hear you, Michael.
It'd have to be a special topic. I don't think I would be able to concentrate well enough to do like a review of a movie. Yeah. But if it was something like this, or we were just talking about like a top 10 list or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I've done some panels at conventions and I always have a good time with that. But it would have to be something very kind of loose and free form where I wasn't didn't have like,
I mean, I could do it. I said we could do it if we redid like Three Amigos or if we redid Rustler's Rhapsody, one that we know so well, and just kind of redo it and talk about our love of it and stuff we like about it. That would be a fun.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. Now all I'm just going to is you all interviewing Steve Martin and Martin Short, because Chevy Chase ain't going to show up. Let's be real. And you all just turning into Chris Farley on Saturday Night Live is like, You remember that time in Three Amigos where
That was great. That was great.
I swear that damn, and I thought I was the only one forever. The caw. Look up here. Look up here. I do that so much and have been doing it for 30 years to people going, what are you doing? It's like, do you all know cinema? Come on, it's cinema.
Yep.
It's film. Let's go. Three Amigos and Plethora and Sweater are also the other two.
Would you say I have a plethora of pinatas?
Yeah. Jefe, what is a plethora? It's a sweater. Like, oh God, that movie. Oh God.
Oh my God.
So is there anything you all would like to see more of in more modern Westerns? Or just like more content? Like books or comics or anything like that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
What would I like to see more of? Trying to think. Like I really like. Okay, there's not enough. Maybe, and there's a lot of like, so weird westerns. So like the idea of westerns with like supernatural bent. Like, there's a lot of comics with that. Like I called out Six Gun, this comic, fantastic comic. Read it if you get a chance. But stuff like that. I read another short story collection called The Adventures of Mad Amos Malone, which has a very similar feel to it. This kind of stuff, like there's some books and there's some comics about it. There's not enough movies that kind of have that kind of bend to it, like a kind of a western with a little bit. It doesn't have to be full super, like Six Gun, 100% full on supernatural. It didn't even have to have that, like hints of supernatural or just kind of a little bend to it that just kind of gives it a little bit of flavor. I want more of that. I would like to see more of that. I'm a big fan of weird westerns, and I want to see more kind of that movie wise, because we get a lot comic wise.
100% second that. The first thing I thought of, Jody, when you asked the question, was just there are certain actors who I would love to see do more westerns. Like, Paxton, I've always we love 3:10 to Yuma. Like we want to see more westerns with Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
And
yes.
What Quick and the Dead, like that was another one. He was in that too, right?
Yeah. God, he was very like unknown kind of in Quick of the Dead.
Yeah, I was kind of before we all knew who he was.
Yeah.
But also like more like female led westerns. Like, I mean, I would love to see like Margot Robbie, as a just badass western hero. Or I'm trying to think of some of my favorite other kind of badass women are Gabrielle Union. You've
got the new Scorsese film, which I know probably will not technically be a western, The Killers of the Flower Moon, about the starting of the FBI. But the young
it's more of a modern day, right?
But the woman who's in it, Lily Gladstone, I think she is indigenous, I think is the proper term now. I can't remember. I think Native American is no more, and it's indigenous now.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to go with. Okay. But it's like setting her up for films could also be interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's another good category, just more movies about indigenous people. We had Prey not too long ago.
That was a good one.
It was great sci-fi twist to it, but it was like from the indigenous perspective. And we're getting more of that kind of thing, but I would like to see even more of it too.
You mentioned the Magnificent. I hated the Magnificent Seven remake. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think there were elements of it that I liked. I didn't like how swagger-y it was.
Yeah.
That really bothered me for whatever reason.
But in a way, the original had that kind of swagger. I mean, Steve McQueen, Yul Brynner, they had their own like 70s kind of going on, and I loved it as well. But the new one I enjoyed quite a bit. Like it does have a more new kind of swagger to it. There's some great characters. Hawk was fantastic. I always think like he had a great name. Goodnight Robichaux. I thought that was a great name. And I've been meaning. I've actually, funnily enough, the last couple of weeks I've been like, I need to rewatch that Magnificent Seven. So at some point here, I'm going to rewatch it. I'll probably talk about it on the show, but I need to rewatch that. I haven't seen it for a while.
And it's a weird thing. There used to be a website called The Dissolve, And I think when that thing got announced, they were like, who would you pick? And I went through and went through the characters and picked who I would replace. I think it was at that point, it's just Denzel and Chris Pratt. And I was like, those are two great choices for the Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen roles. But I picked like Daniel Day-Lewis for the James Coburn role. I was like, man, Daniel Day-Lewis always has to star in a film. I would love to see him come in and just play that silent but deadly kind of character in a film, that he's not the lead. He's just this guy. And I remember I got a lot of comments on there like, he would never do that. And I was like, we're on a website. What the hell are you talking about, man? Like, who cares? I'm saying if I had my druthers.
Right.
And I think I picked Lauren Cohen for the now I can't remember his name, the kid in Magnificent Seven that's following them. That's annoying as hell. I was like, I think Lauren Cohen cast a woman in that role as someone who wouldn't be allowed to join them.
Right.
Could be interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I think it was the movie I made in my head.
Different.
Sometimes
that's your biggest problem. Like for me, is that I get an idea in my head, and then when the movie's not like that, I'm unfairly comparing it to what I thought it could have been instead of meeting the movie where it is. And a lot of times that's where my conversations with Mike help me sort that out, where it's like, all right, I need to meet the movie where it is, not where I think it should be.
There's God, I can't get through a podcast without, there are three names I mention on every podcast. So here we go. I'll mention one of them here, and Mike will not be surprised at all. Kevin Smith has a podcast called Fat Man Beyond, and his co-host Mark Bernardin, they'll talk about movies. And Mark was like, wouldn't it be better? Mark's a TV writer and such, but he was like, wouldn't it be better if they did this, this, and this? And Kevin will look at him and go, stop making a better movie. Yeah. That's not the movie we have. Stop making a better movie. Yep. Yeah, he fusses at him all the time for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone you would like to have on? Any dream guests? Besides, is Tom Berenger still alive? Tom Berenger's.
Yeah, he's still alive. No, not that I know of.
Okay.
No. I mean, Emilio Estevez, 100%.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. It's funny because like a couple weeks ago, he was on the Letterbox podcast, and was talking about, like, he was supposed to talk about like he picked like his 5 favorite movies or something, and none of them were his. But then they didn't really talk about those. They talked about more his kind of filmography, and they talked about Free Jack, and they talked a little bit about Young Guns, not enough. But like I would love to have him on just to talk about his filmography and just some of that. So not even just the Westerns. I mean, like some of the other stuff. He also did. We covered a made-for-TV movie that he did, Dead for a Dollar, on his. Like I think we've done all of his. Yeah. So like I would love to talk to him about all those and just kind of his thoughts on those. He made it pretty clear on that. It was kind of funny. Like he didn't say as much about Young Guns 2, which made me think he didn't love that movie. And there was another one, like a movie of his I love. It's not a Western. It's called Free Jack, but I love that movie. Yeah. And he made it perfectly clear he hates that movie on the podcast. So I was a little bit heartbroken hearing that, but I totally understand because I totally get why he would not like that movie.
Is that the one? Is Mick Jagger in that film?
Yeah, that's the one with Mick Jagger and Anthony Hopkins and Rene Russo. It's a phenomenal cast.
I think I've seen that, but I think it's been I think I saw it when it came out, and that's probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we were ever lucky enough to get celebrity guests, like, let's just go through the entire Young Guns lineup, because I would love to talk to Lou Diamond Phillips, Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah, that's true.
Dirty Steve.
John Bon Jovi. Get John Bon Jovi.
Christian Slater. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys have lost my interest.
I think Christian Slater would be interesting to hear his Hollywood stories.
I would love to talk to him, but yeah, Pax and I have different opinions about Young Guns.
Yeah, we have wildly different opinions about Young Guns too.
Man, that's it. That's your live episode. You two debating Young Guns 2.
Well, we did an episode on it, but yeah, that's one thing I'd love to talk to Lou Diamond Phillips about, because he loves Young Guns 2 more than he loves Young Guns. Huh. And that's I felt the same way about that Pax did about Emilio Trashton on Free Jack.
A little bit heartbroken.
Yeah, a little heartbroken. It's like, come on, Lou Diamond. And plus, he loved McCabe and Mrs. Miller, I think, we did.
Oh, yeah. Movie, do better, Lou.
Oh, my God. Although, now that you're saying that, there is somebody that would be on there that I would be in the crowd being like, can I ask you about 3 O'Clock High, Casey Shamosko? Can I please talk to you for like an
That's a
hour
great movie.
about 3 O'Clock High, please?
Yeah, I would
Please.
probably talk about that movie more than I would about you, Young Guns with him.
God, that's yeah. Casey Shamaska, where is he gone? He's just disappeared. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Do you all set goals or checklist for the podcast?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Kind of. I know I personally set subset goals like we talked about seeing more John Wayne movies, filling out my Clint Eastwood movies, but I also do like little subsets check. Like I did like a mini run of like I'm gonna do westerns that star someone that's not normally in westerns. So that Marilyn Monroe was one of them, and I did an Elvis one, and did another one with Donna Reed. And then I have another one coming up that I want to do where it's like the villain is played by someone that doesn't normally play villains. So, and like if I remember correctly, we're going to do one with Burl Ives and one with his name Dean Martin. So a couple of those where they play villains. So it's like I do little subsets like that where I go on like a little run that's like I want to do a little collection of movies like that. I do that, and I know Mike and I kind of do like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood kind of overall stuff.
Yeah, sometimes we'll collaborate on we want to like Zorro movies back to back or whatever. So we'll plan it out a little bit sometimes. But I don't know if I've ever even told you this, Pax, but one thing I like to try to do is kind of hit the various time periods throughout Westerns. So I'll kind of like, if it's been a while since we've done like a 30s and 40s one, I'll try to, let's circle back and get one of those, one from the 60s and 70s, one from the 70s and 80s, and then I also try to alternate as much as I can between like kind of the big popular ones that everybody knows and then the more obscure movies, because that's one thing that we've been complimented on is that we try to do some of the big classics, but then we'll also try to introduce listeners to kind of more obscure movies. And so like I do have kind of like a plan to make sure that I get that mix in there.
Can I throw an idea out there?
Yeah.
If you're looking for an alternative episode, maybe pick somebody like John Ford and be like, we're going to watch his first film and his first Western and his last Western and figure out how he grew between those two. Or even first like, because you got so many people, Howard Hawks or Clint even like that have had such a broad career.
That's a cool idea.
Those could make for an interesting episode. And did you all watch The Fabelmans?
Not yet. It's on my list. It's not yet.
I don't want to spoil the last section, the last scene, and then the last shot. I think are two.
I've heard what it is.
Okay, have you heard what it is, Michael?
No.
Okay, I don't want to spoil it, but I thought the film was just okay, but those two things, it was beautiful. It was, I don't know how to put, especially the last shot. The last shot made me literally laugh out loud because of what happened in the scene before. And I don't even want to say anything about it because it will be a great, it was ruined. It was told to me before I saw the film and I want it to be a surprise.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that because that makes me want to see it now because before I don't know, I love Spielberg, but I have a limited patience with movies that are about how wonderful movies are.
Yeah. It's kind of also a sad film, film about divorce, and mental health issues. Like I would call those homework films. It's like, this is homework to get through this.
Yeah.
It's like, is, I know I need to get through this, but
well, you're actually making it more interesting to me, so I'll have to get to that soon.
When you do,
it's definitely on my list. I'll check it out. Yeah, it's on my list. I just haven't had a chance to check that. That's a long one, and I really have to try to fit in like a 2-3 hour movie. I really got to fit that one.
There was one
good idea. Go ahead.
I was going to say there was one day where my IMDb watch list, I was watching like a TV show or something I'd seen before. I was like, I'm going to try to pare down this watch list. No way. No way. It's still sitting at like 1,400 films. And I don't even use it for the majority. I was just like, I'm never going to get through this list, man. It's impossible.
Mine's my letterbox watch list. It's like sometimes I'll go out there and be like, all right, let me clean some of this off. It's never gonna happen. It's never gonna be zero. I think
I've got like 20 or 25 in there. It's like I can't keep doing this in two places. I need one place to do this. Like it's driving me nuts.
Yeah, I have no idea how many movies are actually in my IMDb watch list because I use sub lists. So I have like genre lists and stuff. So I've got like 400 movies just in a Western list right now. Like, we'll never run out of Westerns to watch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I look forward to this.
Then that may go into my next. Do you know what you'd like to do in the next 10 years with the show? Just keep doing it, or are you thinking about doing anything different, or?
I no, I mean, I'm not thinking about doing anything different. Not to say that we wouldn't want the show to kind of grow or evolve, but like one of my rules for podcasting, period, is if I'm not having fun with it, stop doing it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean cancel it, but change something to make it more fun. So that's worked really well. It's worked really well for Hellbent. Like I think part of the thing for me, like I'm a planner. I like to have a plan. And it'd be very easy for me to like, try to like hit certain targets and do these different things. But I think that would ultimately suck the joy out of it for me. Like one of the things I really like is not thinking too far ahead about it. Not to me, like Pax and I kind of have like our next movies picked out for, I don't know, like the next 6 months or so, but they could change on a whim.
Yeah.
Like, we'll often have movies that we plan to do, but then they get bumped because something else is more interesting to us. So I think that kind of flexibility and that kind of the spontaneity really keeps me interested in it. Whereas if I was to go, okay, what's our plan for the show? Like what are our ultimate goals here? I think that would kind of start turning it into more of a business concern, which I'm not really interested in.
Yeah, I would be the same. Like, I mean, we started the show trying to keep it as extemporaneous as possible because I was doing Nerd Lunch, which was a weekly show and is very demanding especially at the time. So we were like, well, let's just kind of keep this loosey goosey. And we started doing this record 2 episodes at a time, which is a great. I still really enjoy doing that, and and so like the fact that we plan a month or so, or like, however much, but nothing is written in stone. And hey, this is my new fancy. Now I'm going to knock out 3 of these movies that I was going to do, and I'm going to do 3 brand new ones. And then like it's so loosey goosey, but also and we just have fun with it, and nothing is super too important or super too serious, which I enjoy. So like we just do it, we have fun with it, we change each other's minds about a lot of movies, and that's why we keep doing it, because it is a lot of fun.
And it also leaves us room to like recently we've had maybe 2 or 3 people recommend the same movie to us. Like we really want to hear an episode on, like, Comanche Moon was a recent episode we did where we just kind of did it because we had a lot of people asking for it. And so we just, because we're loosey goosey, we're able to do that kind of thing, which I really enjoy.
Okay. All right. Here's the final question. This is a big, heavy question. And I'm going to take off Young Guns and Rustler's Rhapsody, because I know those will be. If there are 2 or 3 homework Westerns you could give to people that they have to watch, like you got to watch these 2 or 3. I'm going to say 2 or 3. That way we already know numbers 1 and 2. Well, number 4 and 5 are Rustler's Rhapsody and Young Guns 2. There we go. That fills it out. But are there any other that you were like, you have to watch these films? I was going to say, and it could be, you think, unheralded ones or huge ones.
I'm going to do one that I think is fairly unheralded, but I just think it was another one that was really surprised by when we watched it, and that was oh wait, I was thinking of the wrong one. I get the 10 Star and the Flaming Star confused with each other.
Right.
But I think it's Flaming Star is the Elvis one, right? Like
Yes. Wait.
10 Star is the
that's the Anthony
that's
Perkins one.
Yeah, and Henry Fonda.
And the Elvis one is Flaming Star.
It's Flaming Star, yeah.
Oh, look at this. Leland Cleef is in this film. Imagine that.
Oh, the 10 Star?
I'm just kidding. He's your old,
I think
yeah, he is, I think, in 10 Star. But Flaming Star is the one I was actually thinking of, where it's an Elvis movie, but it is not what you think of when you hear Elvis movie. Like he's not a singing cowboy. It's a movie about racism. He plays a young man who his father is white, his mother is American Indian, and the local like white town is getting into really heavy conflicts with the local Indian community, and so this mixed family is kind of caught in the middle of it, and it's a really great performance by Elvis Presley. But the themes are also really good, and I love how just it lets the topic of racism be very messy. Like there are no I don't know. I don't want to say there's no clear answers in this. It's like it is very anti-racist in the in its themes, but it's not didactic about it. Like I don't know. It's like even Elvis Presley's character kind of has to wrestle with his loyalties, and no one group is presented as entirely good or entirely bad. So I highly recommend Flaming Star. It was quite a surprise to me, especially because I went into an Elvis movie thinking, it was going to be like
it's gonna be one thing, and
Viva Las Vegas and with the West
exactly.
or something. Right?
If I can, I will say, when I watched Rio Bravo the first time, when I finished, I was like, how the hell did Dean Martin not win an Oscar for this? Because I thought he was so great in that movie. I love that movie, but he was so great in that film. I was like, it's so against type for Dean Martin, because he was so beat down in that. What do they call him? Borachone, something like that. In that film, I was like, why has no one talked about how good he is in this? Because he's not the ladies' man. He's not smoking a cigarette and and sipping on some Jack Daniels in this film. Like, it was so good. So I like to hear that about Elvis in that film. All right, Paxton.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned like Homework Western, and I kind of see that as like Homework Western is something I feel like is like an important Western you should go see. And then there's like Unheralded Western, which is one I think is not seen enough. I don't know. Like Homework Western, I have a hard problem with, because like you like what you like, and what I think is a Western, maybe not. So, but I mentioned a lot of my favorites. So like, if I'm saying one I think is an excellent, like some of these, I'm trying to think how I want to say it. So Old Henry is going to be one that I'm going to say you need to see this. This is an excellent Western. It's a great character study. It also ties itself into legends of previous Westerns, and it tells this one story with great actors. Tim Blake Nelson's great in it. The bad guy is what's his name? Oh, I forgot his name. He was in Blade. He was Deacon Frost in Blade. Stephen Dorff.
Oh yeah.
Stephen Dorff. It's just the way it plays out. It starts off kind of slow, then it kind of builds, and then it's got this mystery in the center of it, and then everything just comes to a head in like the last 20 minutes. And it's just a great movie, and it's just perfectly capsulizes why I love Westerns. That would be one that I would say it's not unheralded. It's like I happen to randomly hear some guy talk about it on a podcast. That's how I picked it for the show. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to pick this and I'm going to watch it. And it was fantastic. So that would be one for me, would be like, I guess for Pax Homework Western, see this is a great distillation of a Western. As far as like unheralded stuff. I mean, I keep wanting to bring up Rustler's Rhapsody as the greatest, but like everyone I kind of show and say like, this is hilarious. Never thinks something, except for Mike, never thinks it's as funny as I think it's
Right.
funny. So, I mean, we watched it. I literally watched like earlier this year and was laughing again at every single joke that I've seen 100 times. So, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Other unheralded, you know what? So I brought up 310 to Yuma. I love that movie. That's another great distillation of a kind of Western kind of tropey idea of the outlaw and the very virtuous kind of hero that is kind of taking the outlaw to justice. And then, but it's also, you know, it kind of, they become friends and then also, you know, has a couple other things going on for it. I think that's pretty great. And it's a remake. And I like it better than the original. And along those lines, I'm going to say the Coen brothers' True Grit is another one that I'm going to say is, I don't know if I'm going to say this unheralded. I think people really do like that movie. And I do like the original. And I was really leery about the new one. And I think the Coen brothers is better, but that doesn't mean no shade on the original, because I really do like the John Wayne version as well. So, but those are two that I think need shout out, just True Grit and 310 to Yuma, because they're just really, really good movies, really good actors populating the entire movie, great stories, good dialogue, just excellent examples of Western.
And I think it has one of my favorite that guys in the film, Barry Pepper. Barry Pepper is great in everything, in 61, in Saving Private Ryan, in everything he's ever been in. And he hadn't been in it a lot when I saw him in True Grit, and I was like, holy hell. Like, he just came out of nowhere and knocked it out of the park. And
it's funny, I remember Barry Pepper's great. And like, I think the first thing I knew him, he was in Battlefield Earth, which is a terrible movie. And I was like, okay, so I clearly don't like Barry Pepper. But then like he popped up in other movies, like I think the Knockaround Guys.
Yeah.
And then he played Robert Kennedy in the TV miniseries The Kennedys with Greg Kinnear and Katie Holmes. And like the quality of that's debatable. I liked it. He's fantastic as Robert Kennedy. So like he was really good in that. So I turned out, I was like, oh, I just happened to see the one bad movie he's in. He's in a lot of other really good things. So yeah, I like Barry.
And even if you're not a baseball guy, 61, where he plays Roger Maris.
I haven't seen that.
It's one of those weird ones. Do you all remember how like older made for HBO films felt a little cheap? Mm-hmm. Like Billy Crystal directed that. Speaking of which, I already mentioned his name. Thomas Jane plays Mickey Mantle, and he is phenomenal in that. Like him and Barry Pepper as Roger Maris are truly wonderful in that film, and Billy Crystal directed it. And it is one of those, it feels like a made for HBO film, because I think it was like 98, 99, 2000, somewhere in there. But the two of them are very good in that movie. And seeing them portray that year of Maris breaking, spoiler alert, Babe Ruth's home run record. But it also followed the God, now I'm going to blank on his name. Roids. Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa.
Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa run. Yeah.
I think that's actually what got that film greenlit, and it kind of bookends with that part of it. But Barry Pepper and Thomas Jane are wonderful in that film. So I'm just adding on to your list. I'm just adding to your list.
That one was on my radar anyway, and I just never watched it. But I'll definitely get that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being on. I think I have bugged y'all enough about Westerns. So
thank you. It was a pleasure, Jody. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.